All right, so let's look over what we've done so far for the year. I want to look at the vehicles that we're currently holding, and I want to look at the revenue we've generated, and then a tool that we use to determine how well a vehicle's doing and see whether we're going to keep it or not. So first off, I'm just going to go through the inventory. We have two Chevy Malibus, 1720, 17 Tahoe. We have three Chrysler minivans, or had. This one actually got totaled out. We bought it for $18,200, and it just got totaled out. We got paid out $20,000, which is great. We made some money on the back end, and we didn't hold that one very long. I think we made probably $5 or $6 grand. Grand Caravan, C-Max. These are our old Fords that we used to have, our Fiestas, and then our Focus, which we did well on. Two Fusions, an old GMC we don't have anymore. Hyundai Elantra. We have three Jeep Cherokees. This is our old Rio, old Nissan, old Slingshot. We don't have any of those three anymore, but we do have these two VW Tiguans. And so far, just on Turo, we've done 89,300. As you can see, it's pretty, it changes a lot because we'll buy and sell cars quite often. Like we went from, I'm sure in January we probably had like 10 to 12 cars, and then by March we had our full fleet, which was 20, and now we're back down to 15. But before we started buying more cars, like in July, we only had 14 or something. And the Turo revenue isn't everything. This is just what we did on Turo. We did a lot more on private. But our best month was about 18.5, and then we did very similarly on private. So we did about 37 our best month. And then as you can see, summer has been a bit slower for us, but we've made it up quite a bit on Turo. Looking at what our best cars made, and this is also tough to really look at. We have a better diagnostic in this thing I'm going to show you, but this kind of shows you what we've made so far for the year on the vehicles. Of course, we bought some more recently, so the numbers, you can't really look at these and say, oh, this is for the full year. Maybe we bought them in February or March. So you can't really look into this too much. But our top one that we have on here is our Malibu, and then kind of goes down from there. But what I really want to look at is this sheet that we have. So this right now is how we determine how well the car is doing, whether we're going to buy it again. And realistically, we're looking at how and where we want to sell the vehicles. On the left side, we have the vehicle name, what it is. We have the purchase price. These are almost all from auction. A couple aren't. Miles we bought it at. Current value. I just did KBB at good, like the good, the one average to show good condition. Some of these are in really good condition, but I just wanted good to get a standard. And KBB right now is really low. So the prices are not what the cars are actually selling for, like on private. So I know that these numbers are skewed, but I just wanted to go off the real numbers that I could see. And then the miles now, which goes with the current value, and then the mile change, so how many miles we put on them. The price or the money we've made per mile, I think is important, because you can take that and look at it in comparison to what you bought it for and determine whether it makes sense to buy a car that's twice as expensive if it doesn't make twice as many miles, and kind of determine from there how much money we've made on each car from Turo, and then how much money we've made on each car from private. These are only the cars that we have like current in our inventory. So I didn't add all of our old ones as well. But if we look at what these total values are. Okay. Oh, I guess that's what that number is. So 112,541. That's what we've generated so far with the cars that we have currently in our fleet. And then from there, we determined how much money we've made per month, like on average with that car. And then we put how long it's been in service. So these numbers are just for 2023. These numbers are for the lifetime of the vehicle. So as you can see, this goes to 10.5 months. This goes to 11 months. Because these numbers are also really important. What we're determining with this is, again, how much it's making for the cost of it in comparison to how much it's depreciated, and then what we bought it for. So a good example is, uh, let's look at this. Okay, so our 2020 Chevy Malibu did $1,700 on average per month. And then if we look at our 2015 Ford Fusion, if I'm looking at those, I'm going to take the 2020 Chevy Malibu, especially since it's only $3,000 more, and it made quite a bit more. Another thing that we're looking at is, okay, the Ford Fusion depreciated at 3.4% per month on average. And then the Malibu appreciated by 2%. Of course, it didn't actually go up in value. It's just that we bought it at such a good price that we had a large gap in what it was worth versus what we bought it for. So it's slowly been going down from there. But that's just like, if you take an average, that's just what it like appreciated over time. And that's just how I wanted to calculate it. So like in that comparison, I would take the Chevy Malibu every single day. Another comparison you could look at is cars that are like kind of twice the value. So if we're looking at a 2021 Tiguan, okay, that's 20,000, and then you're looking at a Elantra that's 10,000, so about 2 times the value. If you look at what it's generated, so 1126 on the Elantra, and then you're looking at 1966. It makes a lot of sense that it's almost double. It's quite a bit more for the 2021 T1, which is what you want to see. You want to see it roughly double if it's double the price. Another thing that we want to look at is the Elantra's appreciated more, which just means we bought it over market, and this is appreciated by 0.4, so a little less. And then another thing we would definitely want to look at is how much it's made per mile. So looking at the BW Tiguan, we have 99 cents, and then when looking at the Elantra, we have 38 cents. So in this comparison, that is almost 3 times, 2 point something, but about 3 times in price per miles. So in that single column, like they're about equal for 2 times the amount, but in that column, it's about 3 times. So in this instance, I would probably buy the Tiguan just because instead of having 3 Elantras or 2 Elantras, you could have one car making roughly 2 times the amount or 3 times the amount per mile. So I would take that every single day. Another thing that this is really good for is determining whether you're going to buy a car again or not. Sometimes it's not just comparing two and deciding one over the other, but it's determining like a whole type of car, whether you want to buy it or not. And it's really easy to buy one car and say, oh, this is doing so well, and not really know if it's doing well, just seeing the gross numbers and then wanting to buy a bunch more of them. And that's kind of what you see here in these Jeep Cherokees. We bought one, we really liked what we've bought it for, and so we just thought that it could make good money, and so we bought more. Looking at these numbers, you could see that they've depreciated anywhere from 1.5 to 3.7% per month, which is absolutely crazy. We owned them anywhere from 5.5 to 7.5 months, so there's a spread of about 2 months difference. And this is where the inconsistency lies, like crazy. So if you look at the average price per month, the 21, which is the newer one, did $1,000 per month, and we made more money as they got older. So the 2019 did almost $1,500 a month. So if you look at that, I mean, you would think, okay, well, obviously I want to buy the older one because it's cheaper. You're spending $19,400 instead of $23,000. But then if you look at the depreciation, it's depreciated almost, like 2 times the amount. So that's obviously not good. And another figure that I have here, which is good to see, is I have these, which I got about 4 months ago. I captured to see what the values were at that time. And it's crazy because if you look at the Jeeps, we bought these and they were worth on KBB value just over, like barely over what we bought them for, which usually is not good. You don't want to see a small margin when you're buying cars. You want to see something bigger, because if there's a Turo accident or when you're getting ready to resell, you want to recapture that value. But if you look at the VW Tiguan's, which were roughly the same price, we spent about $20,000 for kind of that group of vehicles-ish. The VW Tiguan's, even though we both bought them both for about $20,000, they're worth almost $4,000 to $5,000 more than the other car. So that's a 25% margin gap on top of what we bought the other vehicles for. So like looking at these numbers, even though this isn't the current market value, like if we were getting ready to sell cars or buy cars again at this point, I would 100%, even without looking at what they've made per month, which we know now with that average, but it's like, holy crap, that's a huge margin. Even if I didn't like how well it was selling or didn't like how well it was renting, we could have turned these around and made $5,000 a pop. We could have sold the 2 BWT quads, made about $10,000 in no time at all. And then the Jeep Cherokees, we would have broke even just about on every single one. So it's pretty crazy to see that. And then that's really it for these. Looking back at the minivan classes, this is pretty crazy. If you look at Chrysler, we've appreciated every month versus the Grand Caravan. Given we bought the Grand Caravan the way we hate to do it, which is at dealership. The only reason we did that is we wanted to get a bank loan to get some. We wanted to get some credit, which we shouldn't have sacrificed. The idea of getting credit for overpaying for the vehicles, because if you look, we bought it for about $18,700 and it's worth about $10,000 now. And at a 11-month hold, that's a depreciation of 4.2% per month, which is just, I mean, it's ridiculous. And if you look at, let's see what we've generated so far. Total made, we've generated $7,300. And if you look at a comparison between obviously what we bought it for, what we currently have it valued at, and that doesn't include any of the maintenance or anything, we've lost money on that car. And even worse than all of that is price per mile. Looking at like the other minivans, their median's probably about 20,000, but the median price per mile between these two is like 71 cents, and then this one's like less than half of that at 29 cents. That's crazy. So if I were looking back at minivans, I would rather spend a little more money, spend $22,000 to buy a Chrysler minivan that we're going to have a higher margin gap on, and looking at the made per month, we're going to make more money. But looking further into it, I probably wouldn't buy Chrysler minivans just because I would buy them in comparison to a Grand Caravan, but I wouldn't buy that because, I mean, $1,275, $1,120 in comparison to having a 2020 Malibu that makes $1,718 a month, which is more than it makes, and it costs less and it appreciates more, which just means we have a higher margin gap and it makes more per mile. I would like 10 out of 10 times buy that Chevy Malibu rather than a minivan, because there's no reason to buy something just because you want it. It only makes sense to buy because of the numbers. So if I'm looking at all this right now and determining, okay, what's my next car or cars that I want to buy, I'll tell you right now. I'll tell you first off, we want another Malibu. We want another newer 2020, 2019, 2021 Chevy Malibu. This is roughly what we want to pay. We want to pay, say, $14,000 to $17,000, because if we can get anywhere from 30 to 55,000 miles, that would be sweet. And we know that when we buy them at auction, we're going to have a large gap on it in the market value. What's crazy about this is, like, okay, so you have the 15 we bought it for, it's worth almost 17, so $2,000 gap. But if you look at what it used to be worth like 3 or 4 months ago, it's worth $20,000. Like, that gap in that is insanely big. That's a huge gap. So we need to buy 2020 Chevy Malibu 100%. Next car we'd be looking at none of the Fusions. We don't want to buy anything that's depreciating, so all the ones in red we're probably going to stay away from. And the rule is, unless they're making so much money in the revenue per month that it's like, okay, it doesn't matter how much they're depreciating because I'm making money on the front end on the rentals, which that's not the case for all the ones in red. They don't, almost none of them make sense. So looking back at what we would buy is 2020 Malibu, and then like 100%, I would buy roughly a 2020 VW Tiguan, because that one's done really well. That's it. That's it. If I had 100 grand, I would buy probably two Tiguans, and then the rest Malibus. That's what I do. That's probably what we're gonna do. Is we're in buying season right now, so we're gonna buy a bunch more cars. But I hope you learned something. I hope you got some good information from this. I think the key for this thing right here that I created is just understanding where the money's being made. I think it can get confusing when Turo gives you payouts, and depending on how many cars you have, you don't know exactly where the money came from and how much you're making, and it can just get confusing. So I think that by having something similar to this, it doesn't need to be as in depth, or it can be more in depth, but having something to where you truly understand where the money's being generated, I think is very important, especially if you're going to build a business that is going to expand and buy more vehicles. You need to understand where you need to buy. Because if I didn't have this, I would have just assumed, all right, we're going to buy some more Jeep Cherokees, more minivans. We're going to buy a little bit of everything. But really looking at this now, I can see that that's not the case. We shouldn't be buying a little bit of everything. It's very specific on what we need to buy. So again, I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you in the next video.